Welcome to this short course on the Delphi panel. A Delphi is essentially a systematic approach to building consensus with a group of experts. We use a series of questionnaires or surveys to gain that information. The experts remain anonymous throughout the process. This actually reduces the effects of dominant individuals. So if you were to use another method, say a focus group, where everyone's actually in the same room or on the same virtual call or conference call, sometimes you can have dominant individuals who will speak up a lot and maybe some people who are a little more shy and aren't going to speak up as much. So this process allows that anonymity to help allow everyone to have a voice and share their thoughts and opinions. Now let's talk about the selection of the panel experts. So how do we go about selecting an expert panel? Now there's no exact selection criteria. It really depends on your study's focus and your research question. Subjects should have some set of specialized knowledge or training. Essentially, they need to be recognized by others as an expert to your specific study. Many studies can use have used between 15 and 30 people. Generally, you're going to see less than 50 people in most Delphi panels, but there have been occasions where there have been hundreds of people invited to a Delphi. It really depends on the questions that you're asking and what experts need to be in the room, so to speak. Next, let's discuss the individual Delphi rounds and the workflow of the technique. Now our round 2 is what I call the seeking agreement round. This is where we're taking a mix of Likert type questions. So Likert kind of refers to that from agree to disagree or strongly disagree all the way to strongly agree. This is a type of question that we're trying to get, we're trying to get the panel to tell us whether they approve or disapprove or agree or disagree with what we're saying, based on their first round feedback. Now we're also going to include free comment boxes because we want to encourage the panel to give us their agreement, disagreement, but then off to the side they can say, hey, I disagree, this is why I disagree, or I agree, hey, this looks good. Like they can add free text boxes. But and we'll get into it when we talk about building the survey. I don't like to make these particular free text boxes a required text box, okay? So if they don't have any comments, they shouldn't have to leave comments. Whereas we want them to agree or disagree, so those Likert style questions you'll put in your survey software as like a required answer. Right, so here we're trying to eliminate the items or topics that came from our round 1 qualitative analysis. We're trying to eliminate anything that fails to meet our level of agreement. And I'm going to say an a priori level of agreement, meaning before we start this whole process, we need to say at the beginning, if a statement doesn't reach a threshold, it could be 50%, it could be 66%, like 2/3, it could be 75, 80%. You could even you want 100% consensus. I mean, there's no limit to the level of consensus. It's just that you have to recognize when you set a level of agreement, what's the purpose of that level of agreement? What are you trying to achieve? And so I don't want to say there's an exact threshold here. I think it's also study specific. So if it's a type of question that you need universal, like you can't have dissent or you can't have someone disagree, then you might have to set it as high as 100%. Most of the questions I've asked, I've wanted to be in what's called like a super majority level of agreement. So anything above maybe 2/3 agreement or 70 or 80% agreement, that's going to be in that super majority definition, rather than a simple majority, which is a 51% simple majority. So again, the literature is going to show different answers on here. I just strongly encourage you to as you develop your level of agreement, you give it some thought as what's the downside of a lower level of agreement, what's the unintended consequences. Now as we finish up our analysis of round 2, we're thinking ahead to our round 3. So we're trying to come up with a final list of items where we have agreement, and that we want to then, in our final round, start ranking the order of importance of each of these statements and categories. So round 3 is typically going to be a shorter round, and we'll talk about that as we're just trying to get now that we're all in agreement with the comments or with the statements, we just want to see how do people prioritize each comment or each statement. And again, here's where we're going to maybe use a forced rank approach, so we'll talk about. So I typically refer to the third round of my Delphi as our prioritization round. We're trying to get all the members to rank all of the items. And this gives you some sense of priority as well as like an agreement on the priority from the responses. On the screen here is an example form that you might see in your survey or from the survey reviewer. They're going to see a question, so like please rank each category, and then you want to make sure it's very clear which one is the most important and which one is the least important, right? So if you want to make number one the most important, just make sure that's bolded or really really clear, right? So you don't want the opposite you don't want them to accidentally answer the opposite. Also, I like to include, you see as the bottom, I like to include a final open-ended optional response box so that they can provide additional nuance if they have additional comments.